been called the father of rivers. Witness the most fascinating and untold story of Sindhu, the river Indus. Come join us on an epic journey through 11,000 years of history, geography, and culture. Travel with us, 2,000 miles with mighty Indus.
Hello everyone, welcome to The Drop yet again. This video is the second chapter of the series that began last week. The title of this video is going to be Empathy. And we have yet again with us Tanzila Khan. Thank you, Tanzila, for being with us.
You're most welcome.
So Tanzila, last week we talked about spirituality and self-belief. How self-belief is very important in enhancing meaning and richness in our lives. Today we want to talk about empathy. So I'll start with this. What is empathy in the eyes of Tanzila?
For me, empathy is power. Too much power.
How is that?
Well, the thing is that if we go back in my life, the moment I realized that my choices have an effect on people, and it shapes their beliefs, it shapes their perspective, I was like, wow, this is so much power. Now I'm going to use it, and I'm going to be the kindest person ever. So the power that empathy brings inside you is the power that you can use to actually make a difference in this world. So again, it's how you look at it, that is what makes the difference. So for me, I used empathy as a tool to connect with people, to ensure that even if I'm not running around helping you in any way that I can, at least this emotional connection, this bridging of the hearts can make a difference. And you know what? That's the only thing that makes a difference.
Wow. That's amazing. So tell me, how did you cultivate empathy in your life? Was it something that was conditioned into you by your surrounding, your parents, your teachers, or your friends? What inspired you? How did you embody empathy the way you embody now?
I think we must be aware of the fact that these are not the type of conversations we have in our families. And the word empathy in itself just becomes part of our vocabulary somewhere during our school or something. We never talk about these values. We talk more about superficiality. Even in our house, our very first institution in itself is flawed, which is of the family, of the home. So me becoming aware with empathy happened way back, going ahead in my life somewhere. Probably I was abroad and this session popped up. In fact, there was this one incident in Sweden where we were attending a session, and this person would come and ask me, Tanzila, how do you feel today? And I thought this question itself is so traumatizing, because no one has ever asked me this question. That's not the type of culture or family background I come from, where my gender or myself, this question is no importance to. So that question made me think that these are things that we need to think about, and we need to ask these questions. So when I came back to Pakistan, I started questioning my parents. How do you feel this morning, Ami? How do you feel, Baba? And they really didn't have words to explain their own emotions, and that was the start of an institution in that very home. So I think the entire connection with empathy begins at such a later age that our personalities are formed and we've already made choices. So to answer your question, I think that my relationship began at a very later stage, but like I said, it has brought great power in my life.
I actually completely understand what you're saying, and I actually can relate to it as well. I remember when the first time I went to a therapist, she asked me the same question. How was your day today? How do you feel? That made me really anxious. Like, why is someone asking me about my day? That's irrelevant. My emotions don't matter. But moving on from that, when you show empathy to other people, you're basically inviting them to be vulnerable. So I want to know, in your experience, when you have shown empathy towards people, have they felt safe around you? Have they felt comfortable in being vulnerable? Because we live in a society where people are taught from their childhood that emotions are a weakness. You cannot cry. Tell me about that.
I think being vulnerable is part of the human experience. We all will be vulnerable. Probably you could be feeling vulnerable right now. Now, what do you do with it? Are you channeling it into weakness, or are you channeling it into something that is going to make everybody feel comfortable in this room? That is going to be your skill, your uniqueness, that is ultimately going to shape your personality. So I've cried in public with great dramatic skills, I tell you, but it came from the heart. It was not out of gaining something. It was my expression to invite people that, hey, I feel this way. It's part of my experience. It's an invitation for you to come forward and share. If you feel this way, it's fine. See, I'm brave enough to cry in public. That is bravery. That is never a sign of weakness. And I think that is what leadership is. To be as normal as possible, to be as layman as possible, that is leadership.
Tanzila, when you're inviting people to be empathetic and inviting them to be vulnerable, to feel safe in expressing their emotions, the fear that comes in my mind and the minds of other people, I'm sure, is that how will people perceive me when I'm being vulnerable? How will they treat me? Will they treat me differently? Will they judge me? Will they mock me? Will they show pity towards me? How do we cope with that fear?
First things first, I think we need to filter out perceptions of people. Whose perception matters to us? And for me, it's myself. And I think I'm a great person. So if I'm crying, laughing, dancing in public, I go back to sleep as the same person. I don't go back to sleep thinking, okay, I said this one wrong word in public. But this point in life, this status comes with great strength and a lot of mistakes, I tell you, Hamad. You have to be vulnerable so many times in public. You have to really put yourself out there to know that this isn't that bad. This is just like jumping in the pool and realizing, hey, I can swim. It wasn't that bad. In fact, I was missing out on all the fun. So now I'm at a point in my life where I don't really fear making a mistake in public, because I know I'm going to go to bed as the same person.
Okay, now let me ask you this. I want to be vulnerable. What value will vulnerability bring into my life? If I start being vulnerable with the people around me, will that add more richness into my life? Will that add more vitality into my life, my experience? What do you have to say about that?
I think it makes me a very humble person, because I have been very, very fortunate enough to be on platforms. I've been to places where we assume that the elite and the most privileged people, the 1% has been, and I've been there. But when I think about these aspects, it brings me to the ground. It makes me feel more humble, that you're still a human, you still have a very long way to go, you still have a lot to contribute, and if you're in this space, this is a responsibility. You're not here to party, so make the best of this opportunity. So I think it grounds you down, and that's beautiful.
Okay, so we've established so far that empathy is important, empathy is essential, empathy is needed. But how do we nurture empathy in our lives? How do we nurture empathy in people around us?
I think if I go on talking about that, bring it in curriculums or use media, that's going to take a very long time. Another thing that might too take a very long time is to have a communication. Start with your home, start with your friends and family, and invite them to be vulnerable. And how you do that? By being vulnerable yourself, sharing something from your life that, hey, I made that mistake, that's how that made me feel, but look, it has improved me as a person. So they realize, I like that, I want that. That's the way to go about it. Nobody was born perfect. We all go through rigorous trainings of life and we become what we are today. So if you're scared of that, you really won't end up anywhere, somewhere great that you were meant to be in the first place.
Okay, so I want to come back to vulnerability for a second and talk about the fact that when you start being vulnerable and people around you are very guarded, they're very uptight, doesn't that make you feel afraid? Doesn't that make you feel scared and alone? So what do you have to say about that?
I think being alone also is a choice that you make. I think what we say about ourselves is that we're alone because we have such high standards. We need the person of our choice to be around us to feel loved and cared for. That is not true. I have feel loved by somebody who's pushing my wheelchair on an airport, and we've had those 3-4 minutes of connection where we bonded. And again, I thought that being lonely or being alone is a choice that we make, and it is so unfair to ourselves that we would sulk in our bed, but we just won't get out and talk to our neighbor. We would upload a status on Facebook, but we won't pick up the phone and just call probably our principal or maybe the ayah of that school and just talk to her. So I think this is where we're selfish for ourselves. We want the person or the crowd of our choice, and that is unfair, and that's what we need to address.
Thank you so much, Tanzila, for yet another conversation full of richness, full of meaning, full of insight, full of wisdom. Thank you everyone who tuned in and watched us on The Drop. We will be continuing our series hopefully with Tanzila in the future and bring you more and more insightful topics. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.
It has been worshipped as a god for thousands of years.